Hello, and welcome back to The Director's Cut, brought to you by the Directors Guild of America, where each episode we bring you a brand new interview with one of the film industry's top directors, conducted by one of their peers. Remember to subscribe to our podcast on Google Play Music, iTunes, Stitcher, or on our SoundCloud page at soundcloud.com/thedirectorscut. This episode gives us a glimpse behind the scenes of director James Mangold's new film, Logan. The follow-up to Mr. Mangold's 2013 feature, The Wolverine, this film takes us into the future, where former X-Man Logan cares for his ailing friend Charles Xavier, the psychic mutant known as Professor X. Together, they live out their days in a self-imposed exile on the Mexican border. Aging and racked with pain from adamantium poisoning, Logan would like nothing better than to be left alone. But when a young mutant arrives pursued by a villain connected to Logan's past, the Wolverine must rise again to protect an innocent. In addition to Logan and the Wolverine, some of Mr. Mangold's credits include the feature films Girl Interrupted, 3:10 to Yuma, and Walk the Line. Mr. Mangold won a special jury recognition for directing and was nominated for the Grand Jury Prize for his 1995 feature, Heavy, at the Sundance Film Festival. After a recent screening of the film at the DGA Theater in Los Angeles, Mr. Mangold spoke with fellow director Gavin O'Connor about making Logan. During their conversation, Mr. Mangold discusses the necessity of creating action scenes that also show character development, the unexpected benefits of shooting an R-rated comic book movie, and how he thinks of Logan as a really bloody version of Little Miss Sunshine.
Hey everybody, I've never done this before, so I'm just going to approach this like
we'll talk.
We'll just talk. We're friends and we know each other. And but I do want to say that I haven't seen the film until today, and I haven't read anything about it because I wanted to be a virgin. And when I saw Jim outside, I got to tell you, man, I am floored. I'm floored by that movie. That, like, when you talk about transcending the genre, that is, so what you did is really fucking hard. So I just want to commend you for what you put up on that screen.
Thank you. That's very kind. But thank you.
It's a beautiful movie. I just want to say one other thing. I remember in 1980, I went to see Raging Bull, and I was in high school, and I left that film, and I was floored. And I started reading about Scorsese, and I remember he said in an interview, he made that movie as if he had nothing to lose. And I was watching this film, and I'm curious to ask you, did you make this movie as if you had nothing to lose, or did you make this movie as if you had everything to lose?
I guess my own version of that in my head is I make every movie like it's the last one, so that anyone will let me make. So the most frightening thing to me is if my last movie were some obvious payday empty object. So that would be kind of that's like the great fear would be the but it is we put a lot into this, but I think that interestingly this was an easier movie than some other movies I've made as a kind of personal experience. I think a lot of what I love when I watch the movie, and we just finished it literally 2.5-3 weeks ago. We wrapped in August, so this is kind of a amazing journey getting the movie here now for this date. But when I watch it, what I feel is, I've known Hugh Jackman for almost 20 years now, and this is the third movie we've made together. A lot of the people behind the camera have made many movies with me, and what moves me also about this project was just that it was a kind of moment that I felt like I had figured things out and had personalities around me. I mean, as you well know, so much of your time as a director can be spent not making a movie, but just trying to create peace or psychological space with which a movie could be made. And when I actually wake up in the morning and am not worried about what fucking bomb I have to defuse on the set, and I'm actually just coming to the set to make the movie, and my biggest worry is, will lightning strikes interrupt us in the woods, or Daphne's child hours, or normal, good, wholesome worries about making a movie, and not the kind where you're kind of, your ability to dream is robbed from you as a director because you're doing this other kind of plates on sticks kind of Carson thing that isn't making movies, really.
So then let's go back to the beginning. How did you, because when you watch this film, you go, okay, this is a singular vision. This is a film that doesn't feel like, you can watch let's be honest, I'll speak for myself. When I go to these films, my daughter's a big Marvel fan. I go to a lot of these movies, and as she likes to joke, I fall asleep very often during them, even at times during the big bloated action sequences. Because I just find them to be empty and disposable and about nothing, and they're like soporific, even though they're loud. So when I watched this film, it's everything. It's like the holy grail of movie making, because artistically, it's such a singular vision, which it doesn't feel like there was any studio interference. That's how it feels for me as a filmmaker. And then you get the box.
No, that's how it felt. It felt for me like I got to make, like, it's no less my movie than Heavy, for those of you who followed me for a while. Thank you. That I really never had there's not a single thing I was asked to take out. There was like, literally, I felt like this is 100% my movie, scored the way I wanted it scored, cut the way I wanted it cut, the effects I wanted where I wanted them. It's a synthesis of all different things I care about. And first of all, so you're not out on a ledge alone. And I wouldn't just say Marvel movies. I would just say tentpole movies. I do agree. And it was a very driving, we can talk about the story and coming up with the script for the movie. And we can talk about kind of on the directorial side, all my decision-making processes were not about making a movie that didn't have action, or not making a movie that didn't have loud moments or violence, because clearly I did, but about that exact anxiety, which is that and actually exactly the same physiological response I've had in the movies, which is that there's blowing up and exploding, and soundtrack and Dolby Atmos up the wazoo, and my eyes are rolling up in my head. And I'm like, it's like, I kind of feel like Malcolm McDowell in Clockwork Orange, or I kind of feel like, I don't know what's going on, but I do not care. And my system is shutting down, because it's like, it's kind of the only thing I remember was like, is that when you went over to a friend's house when you're younger and they thought this album was so great and they played it really loud and it's terrible. and you're just listening to this album and they want it really loud. And so it is, but it's just, there's nothing speaking to you on this record. And,
So walk us through how do you sit down with a studio to do this movie, obviously do the previous one, and walk them through, I'm curious about the idea of the movie, the execution of the script, how that, even just getting, and then I'm curious about what was in the script and then what actually ended up on screen.
Right. God, how much time do we have? I'll try and do this short, and if anyone knows me or has heard me speak before, that's a very struggle for me, is to be short. The quick version of it would be, we finished The Wolverine, the kind of Japanese saga, which was a marvelous experience for me on many levels, but I felt some things in this movie are a bit of a reaction to that movie, as well as other X-Men films, and I can get into that, but the main was that they came to me and asked me, and Hugh and I were talking as we ended the last one about what the next one would be, and if there was a next one. And both of us were pretty resolved that there was no reason to make another one if it somehow wasn't worth it for each of us creatively. And from my point of view, that's really about having something that challenges you and reaches deep in some way, and I was having these same feelings Gavin was describing watching these movies generally. And I'd felt, I don't know if you remember when the Wolverine came out, it was kind of at the end of a summer. We were a late release, as opposed to this time we're like the first kind of big summer movie. But and I felt that in the audiences coming to us that they had already been Thored and Supermaned and Transformered, and then I had this the funny experience I had was I had this movie that the parts that were most exciting for me to work on were the kind of the samurai meets Ozu journey of this kind of character in Japan. For those of you who don't know, I made this movie that took place, it's kind of a famous Frank Miller comic, Japanese saga about Wolverine. And then we got to the end, and it was kind of a big finish, kind of a big compete with Marvel finish in the third act. And interestingly, at the end of that year, that was like the thing that the studio probably had thought would be the most appealing to the fans, you felt was actually the thing that was most disengaging. And that the first 2/3 of the movie that the studio was probably most worried, I thought I was making a Walk on Y movie with Wolverine, and they were like, when is this thing going to get on track and we'll have a big giant robot? And that was actually the part that was playing most. So that was in my head, that sense of how could I try to come closer to completing the loop with what felt more interesting to me. But the other thing was just, I even felt encumbered. I wanted to escape even more from what was going on. Part of it was that after The Wolverine, I was going to make a Travis McGee movie with Christian Bale, and we were literally 10 days from shooting when doctors said he couldn't work. He had tore his ACL, and the whole movie was shut down. So then another thing that kind of happened was that all this energy I had to make a kind of noir, weird, terse detective movie, and all my ambition to escape from the Marvel pressures, I think got all dumped in this movie too. But
had you written the script when you started?
Before I started Travis, I had already written an outline I had this basic idea I pitched to the studio right a month or two after we finished press on the last Wolverine, which was effectively a really bloody Little Miss Sunshine, with Charles having like Alzheimer's and Logan caring for him, and that they're on the run, and that X-23 comes to their doorstep, and it becomes a kind of chase road picture. A lot of other movies were in my head, but the idea of taking these characters and putting them in really mundane circumstances along the way, and kind of just jammed in a car, and anything to avoid what I thought was this kind of, for me and my own taste, and it's not everybody's, what was like kind of this Vegas-y gloss that all these movies had in mass that I just did not want to be part of again, like that. And so part of that isn't just telling your production designer, I want it grittier or put more dust on it. It's constructing from the ground up in the story, a story that's going to resist the functioning impulses that kind of drive everything else in one of these movies, if that rambling answer makes any sense.
So you guys write the script, you co-wrote the script, right?
Well, I wrote 60 pages, which was just the bones of the story.
Right.
And then Michael came on, and then Scott and I came on. When Michael came on to do a draft while I was making Travis, that ended up being a whopping month because I just basically wrapped sets and came home from Puerto Rico without a movie. And then Scott Frank and I as a team wrote, and we hadn't even gotten to an end yet on the movie. The biggest writing on this movie happened 1 year ago now. It was just December, January, February, March. March is when we kind of handed the studio a script that actually worked from beginning to end. I mean, the real answer to your question is huge props has to go to the people that run Fox, because they basically elected that they trusted Hugh, they trusted me, they trusted the producers on the picture, Hutch Parker, Simon Kinberg, and they just believed that we weren't going to make a mess. And that, and they really, we also insisted, I was really insistent that I wanted a rated R film. From the beginning, but interestingly, not just because I wanted to have blue language or blood. At this point, I've made a good number of movies, and you just realize these kind of weird Parcheesi ways that our world works. And one of them is that if you can get whatever financing entity is making your movie to agree to our rating in advance, it has a palpable effect on the screenplay writing process, on the shooting process, on everything, not just about the violence. Meaning, simplest way I could put it, if the studio knows they cannot market the movie to people under 16 years of age or 17 years of age, whatever, or kids, effectively, then they also aren't going to tell you to put cute critters in the movie, right? They're not going to tell you that scene in the tank that's 6.5 minutes long between the first one. It's like one big block I wrote early on between Hugh, like in figuring out the story, that Hugh and Charles scene, the first scene in the movie. I mean, there's no way that movie could survive in a movie that has to entertain 12-year-olds. And because it's just attention span deficit theater is what movies that have to serve all these age groups are. And it's like so there's the topics, talking about suicide, talking about grieving, a lot of stuff is suddenly no one's worried about the script because they know they're not selling the script and they're not making a Mattel promotional deal and they're not making, because all that stuff is off the table once there's in the movie. So it's like so there's just a huge pressure lifted off the movie, and the only thing we had to tell the studio was that Hugh had to take less dough, and I had to make the movie with less dough. Then these movies are made. But in a way, that was all the freedom of making, however contradictory or odd it seems to some folks, a kind of adult-themed superhero movie. That was really what was driving us at core.
So let's talk about the violence and the action, because it was brilliant. And it was brilliant. It was brilliant. And this is, and I'm curious how you handle this, because a lot of the times in these kind of Mick movies, they have just disposable violence where you go like that. You could have just taken the action and just moved it down the shuffleboard of any other film, because it was never, but everything in this is born out of character. So the violence the action comes out of character. What I'm curious about is how much of that was on the page when you wrote the script, and then how much of that is actually once you start storyboarding, prevising, and it evolves from there. So sitting down with your
it's a combo. I think that what I try and make sure is in the script are two things. One is that you're handing off the action in a way that there is a sense, I think it's like a musical, meaning that there has to be a sense of story development inside the action, whatever it is, which you need to do at the script level. You can't arrive at previs or with a storyboard artist and start thinking of how your characters are going to change in the middle of the fight. So that has to be in place. And if anything, I think the biggest thing is that you have to think, in the same way you need to give space for your actors to do something interesting, you have to think about how to set up action on the page that allows an interesting metaphor. I don't know if this would make sense, but it's exactly like I figure what Gene Kelly was doing late at night before he would come up with a great sequence, which he'd go like, let's build a set that revolves and Don will dance, we'll dance on the, or let's build these couches and put hinges on them and the three of us will do this, or let's do a rain sequence and I'm going to dance in the rain and I'm going to do this shuffle step through the puddles, meaning there's some architectural sense before they arrive on set or draw pictures that I have an angle for how to do something that's a metaphor about life that somehow makes the action more than just punching and kicking and shooting. So for instance, that's how you have a sequence where Charles's ability to kind of freeze everybody gets kind of twisted into this kind of horrible mass paralysis, and then you have this kind of reverse action sequence in which the hero is murdering the bad guys while they're frozen in place. But somehow, because we're so hungry for something different, that feels cool, or at least to me, because we're just so sick of the other thing, which would just be the pro forma moves of the fight. So we've actually been the thing that then becomes, and it becomes interesting questions about who Logan is and savagery and what you'd do if your daughter or father were in peril. And I certainly wouldn't sit around and worry about whether it was a fair fight if someone were threatening my father or child, and that I just kill them. If they were tied up and I could kill them tied up, I'd kill them tied up. I'd do whatever I had to do to get to my family. But that's a quick example of how I think, or like Laura and the reveal of Laura. Scott, Frank, and I worked a long time on how, they're gonna arrive in there, and then we're gonna cut outside, and then you're gonna hear the noise from inside, and then Laura will emerge, and then I gotta keep the camera far enough away that you don't see it's a guy's head in her hand, and then you gotta, and we're just playing these cards out, and there's all these metaphors. To me, metaphor might not even be the right word, but kind of stuff about parenting, even in the action. Like even Boyd, who plays the guy with the metal hand, Pierce, in the movie. Like I love when Laura comes out, he's like, "Hi, baby, come on, no," and then she starts slaughtering people. But so what's interesting, the angle again is like just suddenly the action, the normal set piece or kind of gunfight, okay, corral moment is subverted by this weird, like, way we talk to children in baby voice. And it's subtle. You don't want to go so far that it's funny when I label it, but you just want enough that it makes the action seem fresh. And I think that's it, but it's on every level. You're working on that and trying to figure that out.
Are you surprised by your ability to execute action? I mean, you didn't start out as an action filmmaker.
Well, what's really weird is my total inspiration to make movies was seeing Star Wars on a camping trip. And like I was supposed to travel Yellowstone Park with my aunt and uncle. We left from Chicago to drive to Yellowstone, and the day before we left, they took us to see Star Wars and it changed my life, and I don't remember anything of Yellowstone Park except maybe standing at a payphone near Old Faithful telling my parents they had to see this movie when I get home. And I had been making little movies and puppet shows and magic shows and all this stuff, but the travel into making independent films was almost by way of dreaming from the beginning that I would be making Close Encounters of the Third Kind, or the movies that really inspired me in my small upstate town. Raiders of the Lost Ark, Raging Bull, I could go on and on. We know Jaws. I mean, the entire kind of 70s canon of movies that broke through. And so I actually got a chance in Hollywood when I was very young, making kind of a more commercial short that got me a lot of attention, and I got hired at the studios at 21 and had an overall deal at Disney. And that's a long, painful story I wouldn't go into now, but it basically didn't end well. I was way too young and unprepared for the dark sides of this business, and and ended up kind of on my ass. Then went back to tried to remember when I was last happy, which was in film school. Went back to New York, and then came back again in my 30s, with scripts under my arm, having written Copland and having made Heavy, and kind of found my way back in. But Copland, as the second movie, was a pretty large, weird movie. I'm a weird character. I mean, in terms of I don't fit in a box. I mean, I think we actually have this similar quality. Is that I think it's very advantageous for directors in some obvious ways to get put in a box very early. So studios, so people know what to think of you as. So press knows how to cover you. And I haven't intentionally defied it for any large reason. And I think your career is similar, but I think that I just make the movies that interest me. And what I feel like so many directors or have been denied is that when you migrate from genre to genre, you learn. And when you sit in one genre, like I can't tell you how much making Kate and Leopold or Identity or helped me with Walk the Line. I could never explain it. I probably could with a lot of time, but it's like that's really interesting quality for me. And I feel like weirdly this movie is like has pieces of all the shit I've done in different places: action, kind of drama, family, and is kind of a tangled knot of a lot of things I love.
That's one of the thematically one of the things that I responded to, and I certainly have it in my own film is family, fathers and sons. father and daughter. So was that when you, from the inception, the genesis of this with the idea, was that a theme that you wanted to explore in this film?
Well, it was this. I was suddenly freed from a saga. I wasn't adapting a known comic quantity, and I was. I could have been, in a sense, that I was asked, "What should we do?" And I kind of went away and I came up with this idea. But what's interesting is I kind of came up with an idea that pushed most sagas away. Although we use a good bit of the look of kind of what some of you would know as Old Man Logan, but that I didn't want to make that story. I first of all, I couldn't, for a variety of reasons, but second of all, the tone was so unremittingly dark. But I did ask myself, like the simple director questions, writer questions that you ask, like I said, what is Logan most frightened of? Because if it's going to be the last movie, what is Wolverine most frightened of? Is it going to be another supervillain with, character actor du jour, color him blue, give him contact lenses, crazy hair, latex armor, and flying foot-powered whatevers, and rocket blasters, and it's like already I'm with Gavin, my eyes are rolling up in my head, and so no, it's not a supervillain. Is it the end of the world? Well, now I could do my riff on how many times we've seen the world end in the last 5 years, and does Logan really give a shit? No, I actually think he'd be looking forward to the end of the world. So what is he frightened of? Because that, on a character basis, not a plot basis, would be the most interesting thing to make the movie about. And what he's most frightened of is love. What he's most frightened of is intimacy. What he's most frightened of is dropping his guard or being vulnerable because of a variety of reasons. One, whenever he's done that, the person he loves ends up dead. Whenever he's done that, he ends up hurt and alone. And he's had 200 years of that repetitiously, and that can get a guy kind of with some commitment issues. And that was what the movie then became about, an elaborate, obviously I'm trying to deliver on all these other levels, but it's essentially a movie about a guy with a father and a daughter who hasn't come to terms with how much he loves his father and can't connect or even allow himself to connect with this daughter who has arrived on his doorstep.
So talk to me about the girl, Laura. What's the actress's name?
Daphne Keane.
And how did you find her? And
miracle. I mean, I had like a 3-legged stool of this movie, 2 of which were, cast already and great actors. And the third leg, Scott and I had written the most impossible role. I mean, I remember the casting breakdown was like between 10 and 12, highly skilled in martial arts or action, terrific method actress, and bilingual and Latina. And so you're like, we went South America, London, United States, obviously. There were searches everywhere. And I saw a lot of kids. But one day I was working on the script and right here in Hollywood, and I got an email from Priscilla John, who's a casting director, wonderful casting director in London, and she had just gotten emailed this little video made by an actor named Will Keane. Some of you might, if you watch The Crown, you might know him from that, but he had made a short piece on his daughter playing this role, which, by the way, they weren't even allowed to know was like X-23 or a mini Wolverine, because that was top secret, and that could be a whole nother rant I'd go on about how we have to make these movies like we're working for the NSA. But anyway, so she's climbing on their wardrobes and bookshelves and tumbling and landing and saying a few lines, and I can't explain it, but I knew it was her. I knew we had her, and I instantly, like, Patrick visited me 3 days later, and I put the tape on, and he was like, it's just this moment, it's a shock of recognition. It's the cruelest thing to ever tell some actors, because it's like, when it's right, it's so right. And like, so it's like, how do you explain that? It's so horrible, because they're thinking, oh, if I just do this, maybe a little more Cockney. What if I wear this hat? And it's like, none of it matters. It's just when the person arrives who is right for the role, they just knock it out of the park. So
what did you do? Did you bring her to?
My first thought was, how do I get Fox to hire her without a process? Right. Because I knew there would be the standard bake-off. Well, you can't just hire one. We need to do tests and blah, blah, blah. And so I picked 2 other kids who were kind of bronze and silver, and kind of went. and we went to New York, and Hugh was, I don't remember what Hugh was doing at that moment, but we did just a set of readings, with me all the time conniving how to make Daphne look awesome. But she was, and she was all those things on the list, and fabulously instinctual young actress. I mean, she just owns it. She owns what it was I saw on the tape from the beginning is she owns the physicality. I mean, the role is ludicrous on its face. That the idea that you would, and this was my own thing, was mostly X-23 comic books actually are about kind of a 18, 25-year-old X-23. I did not want that for a variety of reasons, most of which I just did not want. I felt like it would feel like one of the CW, shows with all the young, beautiful people or superheroes. And I wanted a daughter. I wanted like Paper Moon or the Bad News Bears, or I wanted that. I wanted truly a daughter who needs protection, not sassy, young, hot thing in whatever. And plus the outfits that X-23 wears in her later years are just like ludicrous. So that's the story. She came and she was amazing, and she worked her head off, and she was, and she taught me a lot, about, even when you're really exhausted, sometimes you start talking to a kid, like you just look over here, and then and she'd be like, "What am I feeling?" She just asked me what she's feeling, and then she'd handle it. And, really smart kid, real actress.
Yeah. It's a great example of, you don't need to have dialogue to be a great actor. And sometimes you see with actors they want words, they want lines. But,
yeah,
it's
what you do with in between. It's what you do with him. Yeah,
it's what you do, not what you say. So it's a beautiful performance.
No, she's amazing, and and when she speaks, it's so awesome. I mean, I always look forward watching it with the crowd because it's just like. Yeah. It's just, when we were shooting, it was startling because I think most of the crew had gotten used to her as kind of a mute. And then suddenly we shot that scene like week 3 or 4, and everyone was like, "Holy shit."
How much continuity I mean, this rarely ever happens, but it feels like you shot the movie in order.
No, it was a nightmare. I mean, on a for the ADs and other directors here, it was the biggest part of the nightmare was that I had to shoot Patrick Stewart out in 4 weeks. And so, because he was
driving the schedule.
He was driving the schedule. And so, for instance, the smelting plant where they're living, and he was never once on that property. He never set foot there. We shot that in the last 3 weeks. Most of that action, that's in New Mexico. We started in Louisiana. So I had to plan the footage out enough that you'd think about it. It's like all these shots of him being wheeled out the front of the smelting plant and put in the car. Those are all shot in Louisiana in a parking lot, and with just a lot of left-right planning of just how he's going to plug into this sequence and drop in. But that was the biggest stress. I had to get us to his death by week 4. Yeah.
Okay. So we have to wrap this up.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. I just want to say, I hope we're just leaving award season. I really hope that this film next year during award season is recognized for you, the film, and for Hugh Jackman, man, because that performance is brilliant.
Oh, Hugh is incredible in the movie. Yeah, he does an incredible job.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for listening to this DGA Q&A. Check out past episodes of The Director's Cut by subscribing wherever you listen to podcasts, or on our website at dga.org/podcast. Also, if you're enjoying the podcast, please like, share, and leave us a review. We'd love to hear your feedback. Thanks for listening, and have a great week. This podcast is produced by the Directors Guild of America. Music is by Dan Wally.